Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. My name is Will Trevor. I'm the Director of Programs and Operations here at the Tufts Gordon Institute at Tufts University here in Boston. I'd like to welcome you to our inaugural debate, Dystopian Nightmare or Breakthrough Technology? Should we be worried about the Metaverse? Now, the aim of these debates is to bring together a group of leading thinkers, both practitioners and academics, to discuss and debate a topical issue at the intersection of leadership, innovation, management, and entrepreneurship. Now, before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to Kevin Oy, who is the Executive Director of the Tufts Gordon Institute, who'd like to say just a few words of introduction.
Yes, thank you very much, Will, and thank you very much for all the panelists and the participants for joining our first in a series of debates around emerging technologies and their impact on society. You know, we live in a time where technology touches all of our lives every day, and where new technologies are emerging at an accelerating rate. And with these new technologies, we can do great good, but we can also do great harm. But our world is not a simple place where the answer is binary, good or bad. Our world is much more complex, much more nuanced. And so what we hope with this new series of debates around emerging technologies and their impacts in society, we at the Gordon Institute and the School of Engineering at Tufts can look forward to creating a space where we can tap expertise from around the world for lively, open, and rigorous debate, where we can hear all voices, all aspects, around new technologies and their potential impact on society. And we hope as a result of this panel and future ones, we'll all become wiser consumers and creators of these new technologies. So once again, I thank all the panelists for joining and all the audience for joining in this first debate. And with that, Will, take it away.
Thank you, Kevin. And so first, I'd just like to introduce you to the various panelists. My colleague Annika is going to be posting in the chat the detailed biography of each of the panelists, together with their LinkedIn details, if you'd like to get to know them better. But we're very fortunate to be joined by Bhaskar Chakravarti. Bhaskar is Dean of Global Business and Executive Director of the Institute for Business in the Global Context here at the Fletcher School at Tufts University. We're very fortunate to also be joined by Stephen Ibaraki. Stephen is an investor, a venture capitalist, a futurist, and an author. And we're also being joined live from Hong Kong as well. We have Jean Lim, who is co-founder and CEO of Being AI, who also may have her metaverse avatar, who will be joining her as well. Joining us as well is Robert Rice, CEO and founder of Omniscape and CEO and founder of Transmira. We're joined with a colleague from MIT, David Rose, Chief Technology Officer, Home Outside and co-founder of Clearwater AR. And also joining us from the Fletcher School is Josephine Wolfe, who's Associate Professor of Cybersecurity Policy. Welcome to all of you. In a moment, I will just ask you to turn on your cameras, but if you could just remain with them off for just one moment. So here at the Tufts Gordon Institute, we do offer a range of programs from undergraduate through to professional education. You can see a range of them there. For example, our redesigned MS in Engineering Management was launched in spring of this year, brings together the best of our award-winning on-campus and online MSEM programs, which has been re-envisioned into a single top-tier graduate program that prepares leaders for the world of work. Also, we have a MS in Innovation Management. It's a full-time accelerated program designed for people who want to make things happen, people who are passionate about science, technology, engineering, or math. If you'd like to know more, visit us at gordon.tufts.edu. We also mentioned that this keynote debate is part of a series of debates, and we have another one coming up in a few weeks' time, on March the 16th, from 12:30 to 2. Passing fad or game changer? Should we embrace cryptocurrencies. A very interesting panel, including the president of the Bitcoin Association, Jimmy Wynn. Again, posted into the chat is the link for you to be able to register for that one as well. So now, if I can ask our panelists to turn on their cameras and join us here in the debating chamber. Just a few words on the format. In a moment, I will call upon each of the panelists just to sort of make a 3-minute pitch, either for or against, or somewhere in between the motion under discussion. Should we be worried about the metaverse? Then at about 1 o'clock Eastern, we will start a discussion amongst the panelists. And we're also going to crowdsource some questions from you. So if you can post your questions into the Q&A section, we're not going to be able to answer them all. There's a lot of you in the webinar today. But if you can post them there, we will certainly include as many questions as we can. So firstly, if I could call upon you, Bhaskar, would you like to start your 3-minute presentation on the topic of should we be concerned about the metaverse?
Great, thank you, Will, and thank you for organizing this debate. I wasn't sure whether this was meant to be a classic Oxford debate or not, but at least you have the accent for it. So we'll let you do the Oxford debate, and we'll just have a conversation about the metaverse. So here we are, 2 years and counting, immersed in our two-dimensional world, the digital planet as sort of a bit of a poor excuse for the real planet, but we've made our home in it, we've made our world in it. And here in the United States, our digital planet team at the Fletcher School has done some analysis behind the scenes and found that around this time last year, we were spending 70% more time on work and school related stuff on the internet relative to the year before being 2019, the year before the world changed. And the rest, all the other sites, whether it is entertainment or social media, news and so on, it turns out not that much of a bump. It was about 15% more than the year before. We are getting burned out. We are resigning from our jobs. We are moving to Montana. But darn it, we need something else to do, someplace else to go. Thank goodness we have the metaverse. To tell you the truth, like many of you, I had not paid any attention to this thing called the metaverse until late October last year. And the first time I saw Mark Zuckerberg communing with his own avatar, the avatar, Mark Zuckerberg himself, was in black tights, and the avatar was in a black skeleton suit. Since then, I can't get that image out of my mind, even though I can get the notion of the metaverse out of my mind for a minute. But I was, that thing is just stuck in my head. I was heartened to see that the Zuckerberg avatar in tights had legs, because all the avatars that I have met in my little corner of the metaverse, they didn't have legs. And I always wondered why Nike is looking to sell shoes to creatures that don't have legs. But that's a separate conversation altogether. I am getting distracted, but that's the whole point. We need distractions. And this metaverse has legs. It's going to take us to where we've never been before. Now, you could get skeptical about the metaverse. You could say, this is not real. This is just Zuckerberg trying to gaslight us by changing the topic. And of course, he succeeded. New searches for Frances Haugen plummeted as soon as he came out in his tights. And everybody started searching for the metaverse. Microsoft was planning to buy Activision Blizzard anyway. But now with the metaverse being the thing, the talk of town, they have sprinkled the metaverse sauce all over their not so little acquisition. And unfortunately, they had to pay $69 billion for it, with the metaverse having hyped up the value. And even for Microsoft, that's quite something. And then the talk of last year was all about, bored apes and how people were spending gobs of money and how they were looking down on right clickers. I, by the way, am a right clicker for those of you who are interested in figuring out, where I am on the spectrum. But people spent $41 billion in NFTs last year, which is an amazing amount of money. Other analysts are saying by 2024, this whole metaverse concept is going to be $800 billion. Netscape creator Mark Andreessen, who's created the original navigation of the web and all kinds of cool stuff after that, he's swearing up and down that this is it. This is going to be the future. A couple in Tamil Nadu, they were not allowed to invite more than 100 people to their wedding, so they decided to invite 2,000 people to their wedding in the metaverse. So all their guests can attend the wedding on their phones, on tablets and laptops, and this is going to be a Hogwarts theme party. In case you want an invitation, I can send you the link. Everybody is getting into the act. Walmart, Balenciaga, even Barbados is planning an embassy in the metaverse. Even President Xi, who doesn't kind of like the tech industry, who doesn't like pop artists who have sort of fluid gender identities, who doesn't really like tutoring services, he likes the metaverse. And then you start wondering why. Is it because he sees it as a lovely way to collect data on people from two-dimensional spaces to n-dimensional spaces? So this raises the question about the metaverse: dystopian nightmare or utopian distraction? One metaverse or many metaverses? Is this the end of big tech as we know it? Or believe it or not, the beginning of even bigger tech that we could never have imagined? So here is where I come out. I worry about the metaverse. And there are many reasons why I worry about the metaverse, but let me give you just 5 of them. I had 3 minutes. I probably exceeded them, but I'm going to keep it short. Like it or not, the metaverse is here to stay, right? And we are in currently mostly a two-dimensional space that we really don't know how to handle. Facebook can't control hate speech, not just Facebook, most of the social media platforms don't know how to control hate speech or violence or addiction on their platforms. And they don't know whether they can actually prevent another January 6th from happening. Of course, we know January 6th is going to come every year, but January 6th, the way we know it, we don't know whether that can be prevented in the future. Oh, January 6th is just a US phenomenon. Across the world, there's a February 6th, a March 6th, and April 6th being caused by hate speech on social media platforms that we have no idea as to how we're going to control it. And here we are going from a two-dimensional space of exposure to n-dimensional space. Now, you might say there are lots of really smart tech busters in the administration. We got Lina Khan, go Lina Khan. We've got Amy Klobuchar, go Amy Klobuchar. We've got Tim Wu. We've got all these fantastic people who are going to corral big tech and keep them under control. There's a midterm election this year. Maybe not this year. Maybe let's wait for about 10 years before we can get anything done on this two-dimensional space. So in the meantime, we're going into n dimensions. And I'm sorry, I'm really worried about what's going to happen to our data, what's going to happen to our privacy, what's going to happen to the incursion of hate speech and misinformation, what's going to happen to the surface area that's going to open on cyber attack and cybersecurity. But there's going to be more to be discussed there. So what about some other things? The meta economy that's going to run on cryptocurrency. Hey, I'm just as cool as the next guy. I kind of am into Ethereum and all that. But cryptocurrency, really? Is this going to be the thing? Are central banks going to be happy about this? Is President Xi going to be happy about this? Oh, I don't know. What about all of the people who are worried about climate change? Is this going to really now destroy our planet? Don't know. Let's wait and watch. And then, of course, there's AI, the big thing that's up there. Everyone's talking about AI, the most fashionable topic of the day. AI is going to be all over the metaverse. Do we really know what's happening with AI right now? Out of every $3 that is spent on AI, $2 is being spent by a handful of maybe 5 companies. So we are currently worried about big tech, antitrust, the bigness of big tech in yesterday's world. We are fighting yesterday's fight. Whereas when we look at the investments in AI and the metaverse, it's largely controlled by a handful of 5 companies. And now whatever concerns we had about antitrust, whatever concerns we had about control, those concerns just go up n-fold. And then what about all the internet connections that we need to really participate in the metaverse? It came as a surprise to many of us who were studying this problem over the last 2 years, that we all talked about the digital divide. We all kind of knew that some of us have better internet connections than others. It turns out half of America is not using the internet at broadband speeds. Half of America, this is the developed world I'm talking about, is not using the internet at broadband speeds. So the people who are going to be the internet, who are going to be in the metaverse, will have super internet speeds, whereas the rest of people are just going to be outside the metaverse, hanging out in 1.5 dimensional space. So I worry about the digital divide actually getting deeper. And finally, a fifth reason why I worry about it is over the course of the pandemic, states had increased their ability to do surveillance on their people. We saw freedom on the internet go down. So once again, we have the ability of states to go from two-dimensional surveillance to n-dimensional surveillance. So let me close with a quote from a person who I trust a lot, Vladimir Putin. Now, he is very excited about the metaverse. He actually says that we shouldn't take a pessimistic view of the metaverse where we're trying to escape a reality that we don't like. There's actually plenty to love about this reality, says Vladimir Putin. So let's embrace the metaverse as a place to learn, collaborate, and build stuff. And he says that it's the responsibility of the state to protect not only the user, but the user's avatar as well in the metaverse. So whether your avatar has legs or not, Vladimir Putin is watching out for you and your avatar. That makes me feel really good. But I still have 5 things to worry about. Thank you, Will, and I look forward to chatting further.
Thank you, Bhaskar. Thanks for getting us started with such passion. I'll go alphabetically through the other panelists. If I could remind you, 3 minutes roughly. Stephen Ibaraki, if I could come to you next. Should we be concerned about the metaverse?
Thank you, Will and Kevin, to the participants for this important TGI-hosted Metaverse dialogue. I really enjoyed Bhaskar's introduction. Anyways, I'm actively supporting continuing innovation, and my position will be a support of the Metaverse, which I see as the confluence of many technologies that are centered on the consumer and users. And these technologies include things like biomedical, new materials and nanotech, extended reality, the Internet of Things, edge computing, sensors, mobile, 5 and 6G, 3D graphics, exascale, supercomputing, cloud, space tech, even quantum information science and analog computing. So then the question is, well, will this drive engagements? Well, consumers in the major mobile markets spend more than 5 hours daily on mobile. And this year, there'll be more than 70% of the global population will be online. And I see this as a $3+ trillion metaverse-enabled economy, and even this year. And as framed by Reimagined Ventures, I see these coming in categories such as decentralization, such as with something called the DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, crypto, NFTs, edge computing, and Web3. Also some called spatial computing, for example, 3D engines, augmented reality, virtual reality, extended reality. The creator economy, for example, using design tools, asset markets, workflow, discovery, for example, ad networks, social curation, stores and enablers, and experiences such as through games, esports, social, shopping, and collectibles. However, I'm also mindful of the implications and emphasize something I call RELI, or RLI, which stands for Responsible Leadership and Innovation. And in my ongoing private keynotes and daily work with more than 100,000 CEOs and investors, scientists, and experts, I spotlight that we need to frame the question, include the impact the metaverse is happening or having. And so this means going beyond new services and products, but into new business, organization, operational models, governance systems, economic, political, societal, and cultural changes. And then what about the considerations and accountability, responsibility, transparency, fairness, equity and inclusion, ethics, explainability, interpretability, trustworthiness and reliability, robustness, bias, impartiality, liability and vicarious liability, privacy, confidentiality, contestability, and human control. And whose ethical principles are they? If we as we embed these things in, and what are they, and what are the cultural, geopolitical, legal, and moral implications? And when you implement these considerations, then I see that you have responsible leadership and innovation, or RELI, for the execution of the metaverse. Really, this transformation from a 2-day internet to a 3D, fully immersive experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. If I can ask you, Jean, same question. Should we be concerned about the metaverse?
Sure. So I absolutely think that we should be concerned about the metaverse. So it sounds a bit ironic since we're in the business of creating AI beings that roam around in the metaverse as well as the real world. But it's sort of like giving birth to a child, right? You still want to make sure that the child learns good things, have good moral values, and they learn and develop in a good way so they don't become a murderer or a criminal. So I still think, even though I'm creating stuff for the metaverse, I still think that we need to worry about our child, which is the metaverse that we created. So several considerations here. The risk that I see, the first one being addiction. So, we know that kids play a lot of games now, but metaverse being fully immersive and also gamified. So you could actually, train your NFT character to be more valuable, to take on more weapons and sell them. So it becomes much more addictive than a normal game, because now you could actually transport your assets across different virtual worlds and make money. So that's one consideration. There was actually a study that I think it was from Facebook, the Facebook reveal from their internal research, saying that 1/3 of girls, young girls, are actually depressed because of overusing the Instagram. So, you could imagine that things will be a lot more addictive on the metaverse. The other important consideration, which I worry a lot about, is disinformation. So there's this new AI, it's called Generative Adversarial Network, called GANs, that could create original music, contents, videos, images, voices that basically fool the experts. So it's basically two AI competing with each other. So there's an AI that generates these images from noise, and then the other AI is sort of the discriminating AI that kind of decides whether that's good enough or not good enough. So once you go through like millions of iterations, you have a piece of work that is almost as authentic as the real thing. I think we've seen a lot of those deepfake videos that fool a lot of people, and recently there's been people basically calling companies and pretending to be the CEO and asking the chief financial officer to wire $35 million because they recognize the CEO's voice, which is actually a fake voice. So there's a potential for big disruption to society, not just putting fake news out on social media, which is actually very damaging in and of itself. So the other thing that I think would become increasingly a big issue is IP, intellectual property. So who owns what on the metaverse? If you think about it, everything on the metaverse is actually a creative work. So whereas in the real world, nature, you cannot actually argue about it, right? Everybody could actually use, could listen to bird songs or could actually enjoy trees. But in the metaverse, actually everything is artificially created with tools that are owned by someone else. And the world itself is actually owned by someone else. So, I guess depending on how you look at metaverse, whether it's going to be owned by one big tech or there's going to be multiple metaverses, still somebody actually owns those work. Somebody owns those worlds, owns the trees, owns the virtual trees, owns the clouds, owns the bird songs and the birds. So, does that mean in the future, all creative work in the future would actually be owned by a small number of people that actually has control over the AI? So that's a worrisome thing. for me. And the obvious ones are, of course, personal privacy and the big brother control. So Metaverse is a playground for data mining because basically it cuts across your entire digital life. In your real life, you kind of do things and different companies have visibility to different things. But in a Metaverse world, the Metaverse world owner actually has visibility to everything that you do. So, it's a much bigger trove of data and cuts across your entire life, digital life on the world. So the other thing, which is a big concern, actually there's like two more concerns, many concerns. So Metaverse may be artificial, but it's increasingly where the young people spend a lot of their time. And so, as we know, our sensory experiences actually affects our mental wellness, which in turn affects our physical wellness. So, right now there's no regulation on things like cyberbullying, personal safety. So, you could imagine violence and a lot of abusive behavior happening that causes long-term mental and physical wellness for people who spend a lot of time in the metaverse if it's not reined in. And the other thing is, in the real world, we have important areas and professions that may potentially pose a high risk to society that are regulated. So, professions like doctors, law enforcement officers, teachers, accountants, financial advisors, even architects and engineers, they're all certified and regulated. But in the metaverse, you could be anybody you want. You could do whatever you want. It's not regulated. I don't believe that right now there's certification for any of these professions. So the final thing that I'm worried about is the loss of humanity, because in the metaverse, without these regulations, we don't need to be responsible and accountable for our actions. It's, I don't remember the name of that story, but it's like the story of the guy who has an invisible cloak. He covers himself and then he could run around and rob banks and kill people and he wouldn't be caught. So, I'm just concerned that without the accountability and the regulation in place, people just will do whatever they want. But having said that though, huge opportunities in the metaverse. So I'm not saying that we should stop it. I'm just saying that, like raising a kid, we should always be concerned about how it actually is created and learn and grow over the time.
All right, Jean, thank you very much. If I can ask Robert Rice. Robert, should we be concerned about the metaverse?
Well, I, for one, would like to be the first to warmly welcome our new metaverse overlords and let them know that I'm in full support and good to go. Now, I'm being a little facetious there. I do think we do need to be worried about it. There's a lot of amazing and good things that can come out of the metaverse, which I guess I'll address shortly. But when you think about where things are right now and talk of regulation or what happens if all the big tech companies come in and kind of own and dominate everything, I think the initial promise that we had with the internet in terms of this open, free forum, this sharing and exchanging of ideas and new ways to communicate and kind of cross-cultural sharing, I think has been kind of stolen from us to a large degree with web and Web 2.0 technologies, and it's turned into horrible racist hate speech on social media. A lot of cat photos, and now the big thing running around are all the 2D pictures of apes, and what happened to all the positive things. And while I think the metaverse, as a lot of us are envisioning it, can bring a lot of these things back and kind of like actually change the world for a change, the concern now is who's going to be in control or who's going to dominate it, or is it going to be at the other end of the spectrum where it's completely decentralized and it's just this big anarchic sort of mess where there's no consistency and you're overwhelmed and oversaturated with content and ads everywhere, and it just gets worse and worse when we start talking about adding in more types of technology. For many people, metaverse is defined as kind of a social VR sort of space, but if you kind of pull back a little bit and you think about augmented reality and spatial computing, as well as 3D spaces and social VR worlds, and kind of view all of this under the umbrella of the metaverse, that becomes more exciting because now we can, interact and engage in new ways with the world around us from other locations. But it also becomes more scarier when you think about the enabling technologies. Now, we have phones, and Google can tell you if you're standing up or sitting down, or if you got in your car, and Facebook knows what you want to buy before you even buy it. But imagine taking this to a whole nother level where your heart rate is monitored, the dilation of your eyes and your pupils is tracked, what you're looking at, where you're looking at, how long you're looking at it, what your avatar is wearing, where you've been, who you've interacted with, what content you've consumed. When the metaverse becomes, I guess, ubiquitous enough where it penetrates our daily lives, and it has to do with our work and our collaboration and how we meet and socialize with people, the level of invasiveness and data mining that can occur, or even oversight, I think is tremendous, and a whole nother magnitude, higher than we currently have. Now, if I don't want to be tracked or I don't want to talk to anybody, I can simply turn off my phone. But if we are talking about the metaverse, then I need it for work, or I need it for, education, or I need it for medical, or whatever. It can go sideways pretty quickly. So, then maybe the natural response is adding in some type of, regulation, and kind of maybe keeping bigger companies from owning and dominating. But then I think there's the fear factor of maybe applying too much regulation. I think, given, again, the current political climate, sometimes if you have the wrong opinion, you get shut down. The whole community comes after you, and there's this clamping on, free speech. Or you think, in certain countries, U.S. or otherwise, people, want to protest and express their anger at certain things. Should the metaverse allow that? Should it be an alternative to protesting in the streets, or standing on a podium somewhere in a park and sharing your opinion, or should we allow it? Should we make it easier for people in oppressed environments to have a safe space where they can meet with others and share their thoughts and show solidarity? And that too changes because of the environment. It's three-dimensional. It's not just text. Sometimes just the sense of presence, of being with other people and being around other people, can have a huge amount of impact on social interactions. So yeah, long story short, I think there are quite a few hazards and things to worry about. Too much control, too much oversaturation of advertising and media, and just nonstop content. Certainly also incorrect or untrusted data. As we look at this and start bridging into more things in the augmented reality space, or enterprise applications, or trying to take data from smart devices and smart buildings and smart cities and use that to populate data visualizations. If we can't trust that data, it's kind of like the old days when GPS first came out. It was possible to have a guidance system drive you right into a lake. I think can be potentially even worse. You may get walked right into front of a car walking down the street because you're busy with your augmented reality glasses and it says turn left. So I think that's a big deal. And one other issue too, I think there's a push and a pull between privacy and anonymity, as well as being public and being accountable. Again, looking back at the older days of the internet, with communities like the Well and other areas of social discourse, you were you had a name, you had a reputation, and if you put an opinion out on a forum or a bulletin board, you committed to it, and that was you, and there's no going back. But now today, it's so easy to just spin up another social media account with a fake name and say whatever you want, or even just to troll or trigger people. I think that's going to be a huge and massive problem with the metaverse. Am I talking to an AI? Am I talking to another person that's real or fake? Are they a real doctor? Are they not a real doctor? Kind of echoing the former comments here. But I think there needs to be some level of accountability and identity early on, that's verifiable, and we can hold people accountable, but also the ability for individual users to control who sees and who accesses that information, and give them the ability to have aliases or other types of roles and personalities depending on the context of the environment that they're in. So I think there needs to be some kind of balance in the middle where the systems or the overlords, as it were, can hold people accountable, but you can also maintain privacy and control over your own issues. So at the end of the day, I'm actually very, very positive. I think there's a lot of potential for new ways of commerce and communication and collaboration and creation, and really lifting the boat for everybody around the world, being able to, again, experience their own environments in new ways, but also interact with people in other places and locations in new and very interesting ways that haven't quite been seen before. except maybe in the game industry, in some of the virtual worlds that date back to even as far as the 80s. And I think we can look to some of those for ways to handle some of the issues we're talking about as we move forward. But overall, I'm very positive.
Robert, thank you very much indeed. Over to you, David Rose. David, I thought you joined us as an avatar a little bit earlier.
I was doing an experiment on how obnoxious it would be to just appear as an avatar for this panel, and I just couldn't stand it. Like it was, I think it's really hard to have a substantive discussion as an avatar. I don't know if you're experiencing the same thing. So the question, should we be concerned about, what I'm going to talk about is the real world metaverse, otherwise known as augmented reality, or what I call supersight in my book. I think humans have a hard time envisioning the future. We trust what we see, typically what's right in front of us on Fox News or in our own backyard or on our Facebook feed. And sadly, the biases and beliefs we have are incredibly contagious and clustered, as we've seen. So what can we develop in order to escape this myopia? I believe are new tools that help see other people's point of view and extrapolate the future or the future outcomes of things. Augmented reality and the metaverse is one of these tools. Sunglasses are tools that we all own that help us see through glare. This is not dystopia. A rangefinder is a tool that helps us estimate distance. Also could be built into wearables. This is also not dystopia. These AR swimming goggles help show my heart rate and lap count and stroke efficiency. This seems pretty harmless and pretty motivating. These trendy Meta Ray-Ban specs record the highlights of your day with a tap to share with your friends. It's creepy, perhaps, but not dystopia. And these AR glasses can help you see your notes or conversational cues when you're talking to your wife, or the future through this Pico projector. For example, a vision for a more walkable city or a more sustainable yard, or just where to drive your boat to avoid rocks. So I believe it's only with this kind of first person clarity and clairvoyance of seeing things, seeing the future with our own eyes, that we can be motivated to make a change and to make it so. So my argument is that augmented reality may be the best hope, not only for the future of games like Pokemon, but also for the future of work and collaboration, for experiential learning and in-context training, for social shopping, for distributed healthcare and wellness, and for envisioning more sustainable landscapes and cities. So the metaverse is not a dystopia, it's a powerful tool to expand people's vision.
David, thank you. And finally, Josephine, should we be concerned about the metaverse?
Thanks so much, Will. I've changed my mind a lot listening to all my fellow co-panelists. I think when you go last in a big group like this, it's important to say something different from what everybody else has said. So I think I'm going to answer that question primarily no. I don't think we should be very concerned. I think, at least from my perspective, as somebody who studies digital security and privacy, all of the concerns that have been raised around those issues for the metaverse are concerns that absolutely already exist with all of the other digital technologies we rely on. That the idea that the content we consume and the people we interact with is being tracked, that the idea that that information is being shared and aggregated across platforms, all of those are things that are absolutely already happening, that we certainly should be concerned about, in my opinion, that there is a real need for thinking about and regulating and trying to develop some norms and some standards for. I don't see anything very new in the metaverse, right? The sort of very specific, concrete things people talk about sometimes have to do with eye movement tracking, that's going to be the kind of data that's collected a lot more frequently, though again, that's something we already sort of see moving its way into the online advertising space. I don't, at the moment at least, see a lot of evidence that the kinds of data that are being collected or the ways in which that data can be analyzed and used for whatever purposes are so different to warrant a lot of focus and a lot of attention, especially at a moment when there are so many much more pressing digital privacy and security issues to be thinking about in this space, which I think if we make some progress on, will also, because of how similar they are to the kinds of data collection and attack surfaces that will be created by metaverse technologies, lend us some assistance in thinking more about the future and what kinds of security and privacy protections we'll want if we do, in fact, move further into this augmented reality space. And I would just end on a sort of note of caution, perhaps echoing what David just said about how bad we are at predicting the future, right? This kind of stuff has been around for a very long time. I think Second Life is coming up on 20 years old. So I don't think that, even though we're certainly seeing a lot more money, we're seeing a lot more big companies get interested in this space, that it's necessarily a foregone conclusion that this will be the primary driver of data collection, of cyber attacks, of anything else in the future. And I think it's for that reason worth being a little bit hesitant about sort of how much of our time and our energy and our concern we focus there as opposed to other areas.
Josephine, thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists for some very insightful and at times very passionate pitches around the metaverse. I am going to go straight to the Q&A section first, actually, because there's some interesting questions coming through. And I'm going to take us one step back, actually, because Randy is actually asking a question that I'm sure they're not alone in asking. What exactly is the metaverse? How does it differ from Sims, Farm Life, Second Life, of all of that? David, can you give us a working definition?
I think it's tough to say because it's an umbrella term that's folding in lots and lots of memes at this point. I think the best definition is it's a virtual projection. It could be over the real world or in a virtual space. It involves people represented somehow and has persistence. That is, it happens. It's ongoing without us. When we move something in the world and we come back to the world, the thing that we've moved maintains its position unless moved by others. And it's starting to fold in like more capabilities in terms of NFTs and ways of paying and digital twins, that is kind of copies of things in the real world that are digitized and brought in. But that's at least a starting definition. Does any other of my other panelists want to lop in other important features? It seems like Stephen had a very expansive definition of all of the other things it might include as well.
Stephen, would you like to help us out with the definition? Is it, and if in answering, Stephen, one of the observations that one of the people have put in the Q&A is it the Matrix?
You know, it's interesting. I would say it's a version of the Matrix, an early version of the Matrix. Excuse me. So if you track Elon, though Elon's not necessarily in favor of the Matrix, but if you look at the supercomputing platforms that he's creating, the automobile, the autonomous vehicles is not a vehicle. It's a platform. Everything is platform oriented. Then you know, that the metaverse is really some aspect of an early aspect of the Matrix, without the political and the other sort of associative problems that could arise, but really the experience I think would be very similar. So, you know, adding to what David was saying earlier, or just in support of what David's saying earlier, you know, there's decentralization aspects of this thing called the metaverse, and you know, having some kind of economy that's built into the metaverse, and you see that in gaming platforms already. Yeah, you see this 3D aspect that's really immersive through 3D engines. There's a Unity engine from a gaming platform. There's the Unreal Engine from Epic, for example. Those are examples where you can have a really immersive environment. Plus, two of our guests here, David and Robert, have metaverse companies where they're creating these immersive environments. There's this aspect that you can enter the metaverse using your phone, like Pokemon, right? You get this overlay, or you can do it through glasses or even contact lenses or even direct neural interface, which is what Elon's working on for other purposes. But you can see that evolving in this area. And so this idea of augmented reality, virtual reality, extended reality, but it doesn't have to be a headset. It's going to be a variety of ways to get there, including maybe a pod at some port, or when you're in your autonomous vehicle, you'll be in some kind of metaverse environment, let's say in 3 to 4 years. And this whole idea of a creator economy where you can participate. So you're not a passive part of that metaverse, just like you see now in some of the games like Roblox. You can create your own games, or Epic with their Fortnite. You can have events occurring where you can participate, but you can also create your own sort of virtual digital sort of representations of things and so forth. You can have asset markets represented. And then this whole this idea of discovery, social curation, stores, physical representations of all of this, and then all the experiences, the social interaction. But because it's digitally enabled, you can use genes, being AI avatars to engage, which have some kind of AI. You could talk to a digital representation of Einstein or something like that, maybe backed by GPT-3, these open AI platform. You could do shopping. So really, I see it as a 3D representation of everything that we're having in the physical world. So even buildings and so on. And the reason that I compass all of these bigger technologies is because, for example, I mentioned quantum computing. And the reason is because you have to factor in quantum encryption and quantum safe computing and things like that. So that's why I'm talking about all of these other technologies like nanotech, because your clothing, in fact, there's companies already researching on this right now. You can have embedded sensors, and those sensors will then allow you to participate in a digital way, in a kind of a very immersive and way. But keep in mind that all of this doesn't have to end in the dystopian way. That there is a metaverse, it's called Translucia, out of Thailand, and their basis of theirs is goodwill, goodness, well-being, really sort of a foundation of governance as well, good governance, to make sure that it's based on goodwill and so on. And then they're layering the technologies on top to represent all of the physical entities into this digital experience.
Alrighty, thank you, Stephen. You touched upon it there in terms of governance, and Christy Beebe in the Q&A section asks a similar question. Bhaskar, perhaps I can come to you first with this one. Christy says this sounds like a nightmare in terms of the legal framework and human rights. Can you speak a little bit more about where that where the legal framework and regulation will come from?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Thank you, Will. And I hate to sound like that boring old uncle, at a party, you just being a downer. Well, everybody is super excited about what's ahead. And I'm just as super excited as the rest of you. But I'm really worried. I'm worried about one thing, though, which is I rarely try to go up against my colleague Josephine Wolf. And I'm getting a little worried about the fact that I'm kind of going to disagree with her. So this is going back to the governance question. Josephine knows a whole lot more about cybersecurity than I ever will. And if Josephine says that going from two-dimensional space to n-dimensional space is no biggie, I will go along with her. But you know what, Josephine, I'm not all that sure. I'm not sure that, and putting aside the issue of imagining the future, we don't even have enough imagination to imagine the past. Two-dimensional space is ungoverned. How is it possible that the biggest company in the world, biggest in terms of the number of people who are on its platform, I'm sure many of them are bots, but several multiples of billions of people log in on a monthly basis on Facebook, and Facebook still doesn't know how to corral 10% of the content on its systems. And this is on a simple social media platform that's been around forever. So the moment you go into this new space, when we talk about governance, Who is going to set the rules? Who's going to do the monitoring? Where is the technology? Who has the incentive to put this technology in? If it is going to be led by the social media players, they basically know how to do one thing, which is capture your attention, keep your attention on the surface area long enough, and then sell that attention. So that's about all they've done. Facebook has one product, and that's about it. So I really worry about this notion of governance. That's just a theoretical concept. Who's going to do the governing? Lena Khan ain't going to be doing the governing. Mark Zuckerberg ain't going to be doing the governing. I and you aren't going to be doing the governing. Who is going to do the governing?
Thank you. And I will go to you, Josephine, on this question of a legal framework. But also, once you've answered that, Josephine, there's a question from Leah Jacobson, who's saying, if we already acknowledge problems in our current world with privacy, addiction, etc., why should we support a platform that encourages more of these issues? Why not devote our energy to reducing technological addiction, improving privacy, etc.?
Sure, thank you. Well, I, of course, also try never to disagree with Bhaskar because he's so much wiser than I am. I think I have trouble not agreeing with him that there is a lack of governance in this space, which I think is absolutely right. I don't think it's unique to sort of thinking about virtual reality. I think that there's a lack of governance in general around collection of data, processing and storage of data, and that applies to many, if not all, of these same companies that are now exploring the virtual and augmented reality space. So I'm definitely with you on that one. I'm not sure I see immediately how those risks change substantively when we move from sort of the interactions we have online now to ones that involve more virtual reality, right? As I say, I can think of some specific kinds of data. Eye movement tracking comes to mind. I would say, face data is mostly already being pretty rigorously collected. There's an argument to be made that if you're appearing as an avatar, as David did for a little while, you're in some sense protecting more of your face data than the rest of us who are here with our faces showing clearly are. So I don't think it's straightforward. I don't think it's always sort of, more augmented reality leads to much greater risks. I do think it could lead to new ones, and that you would want to be sort of tracking those and thinking about governance and regulation in that space as that emerged. I'm not sure that I at least feel qualified to say sort of what that space will look like or who will use it, to the point of having a good handle on what those governance mechanisms should look like, which is why I was sort of arguing for, let's start with the space that we've really seen adopted very widely, right? The space where we have personal data being collected, where we have ads being targeted using that data, where we see a lot of sort of facial recognition and other biometric programs coming up. That would be my inclination of sort of where to start and where to focus right now, and then to sort of track the virtual reality space as it progresses and think more about that. And then onto the question, the other question that you brought up, Will, about this question of, is it sort of why we should be supporting these? Is that right, or have I already forgotten?
Let me find it. Yes, it was.
So I think you shouldn't be supporting virtual reality applications unless they provide some use or value to you. And most of them at this point, for me personally, don't, right? I think that, if you take some joy from playing, what's it called, Beat Saber, if there's something that you think is fun about having these tools and using these applications, or there's something that's useful to you, then that's fantastic. And that's why you should support them, because you think there's some value in them. I think a lot of people right now, and I would include myself, don't think they're at the point where they're very useful or very interesting or very valuable for most applications, certainly most applications outside of entertainment and gaming. And I think the onus is really not on the rest of us to say, like, we should really support this, it's going to be so important. The onus is on the people who want to develop and sell these technologies to produce applications of them that people actually want to use and that show their own value. And I think if they can do that, then I would be willing to say, yes, there's value here. Yes, there's reason to support these for the rest of us going forward.
Thanks, Josephine. This next question, Robert, perhaps if I can come to you first. Quite a few of the panelists in your initial pitches touched upon the issue of interoperability. Andrew Howell is asking, given that metaverses will be created by companies, and those companies may or may not believe that individuals should be able to move from one metaverse to another metaverse seamlessly, what role do you believe that the standards and interoperability should play? Should standards-based interoperability be required? If so, who would require it?
That's a good question. I hear that a lot from other developers and just people generally interested in the space. And as far as I can tell, the general consensus is we all want this amazing, completely interoperable, completely decentralized. Anything can go anywhere, at the drop of a dime, in a mere second. And I think that's interesting, but I don't think it's feasible. I think in general, what we'll see is a lot of, walled gardens or, big companies or small companies developing virtual worlds or applications or environments. And then over time, as, one or more or many of them become popular and used, I think standards will emerge from that as then we begin to see partnerships and then, crossover, after the fact. I think for people that are trying to think about, hey, let's develop the standards now before we even know what those ultimate use cases are and try to predict the future. I think that also is a good endeavor, but it's really hard trying to get everybody in the room to agree on a single standard. And when you're developing a standard for something that hasn't quite been built yet or still has some unknowns and uncertainties in terms of what it will look like in the future, you end up risking constraining yourselves artificially and then ultimately not making something that's useful. I mean, I remember back in the day when VRML came out and everybody was super excited about that, and thank goodness that's not still the standard today for what a 3D or VR space, and it is a potential that it could be. But even then, underneath the context of interoperability, that's a technical issue, getting some content from point A to point B. But we also have to consider the design issues and the context issue. It's not a good idea for me to have my level 40, wizard or whatever from World of Warcraft suddenly showing up in a corporate meeting, in Meta's Horizons or some other sort of deal, or me flying my giant spaceship from EVE Online into maybe a Decentraland and blowing up everybody else's buildings. So there's a lot that has to be considered for things like interoperability. But I don't think there's going to be any one single standard or any one company kind of dictating terms. I think, when you look at the tools that are out there, whether it's Unity or Unreal or SketchUp or whatever, there's some native standards already in terms of file formats and sizes, or just how do we create things. But I think the other more important thing is really interoperability in the database side, and how do you find a level of commonality or conversion. And I think when you start thinking about things that way, does an object like a chair in one environment have the exact same properties as a similar chair in another environment if I move it, or same thing for a gun in a game. There has to be that kind of that translation layer, even beyond just being the interoperability. There has to be a good bit of thought in terms of how all these things work. But this also
can I just sorry.
Sure. Yeah. No, go ahead.
It seems like I'm kind of curious why you think there's such an appeal to interoperability. And maybe one is like the interoperability of gestures, like a bloom gesture might mean the same thing in one space versus another space, or just so we can establish interface guidelines in order to just learn faster seems like a useful interoperability. But something like a reputation system seems like, even though there might be like an engineering appeal to the person that I have in one environment is the same as in another environment, I think that introduces a lot of privacy issues, doesn't it? Like, because don't you want a clean slate between your Uber, Airbnb, and Metaverse reputations profiles?
Yes. So two points. First, as far as gestures, I think that kind of falls into the design pattern sort of category. Everybody knows WASD, move forwards, backwards, left, right. That's fairly common, and it doesn't need to be established as standard. It's just one that's emerged over years of people, playing first-person shooters. To your second point,
about reputation.
Oh yeah, reputation. No, I think that's important. I think there's a sense that people want to be themselves and have ownership of their identity and ownership of their objects, whether it's an NFT or virtual goods or a pair of shoes in their avatar, and being able to seamlessly go from one world to another world, kind of like you would in the Oasis, for Ready Player One. The tricky part there is the Oasis is basically the example of a single centralized, dominated by one entity sort of perspective, even though there's thousands of individual worlds, kind of part of that. And I think that where we're kind of at now in the world, tools are accessible. A high school student can take 2 or 3 weekends worth of Udemy classes and create their own augmented reality application in like no time at all. A non-coder can do that very quickly. So I think that while we may have a couple of big ones, there's going to be tons and tons of small ones. They're all going to be interconnected to some degree or another. But then the next question, getting back to the regulatory governance, is there going to be some standard that demands how we all act and interact in each one of these environments, or will it be up to the people that are hosting and creating them? And I think that's probably the more important thing. I feel like my job as someone who's trying to build out a lot of this and working very hard towards it is less about establishing very specific and static rules and regulations and processes and whatever, and more about enabling and facilitating. I think if I make it easy for other people to create and share content and monetize their work and share their opinion and socialize and interact and do things, it's less about me force feeding or spoon feeding you content to consume, and more about me giving you the ability to create and explore and discover. And I think if that sort of philosophy kind of ends up being more pervasive and ubiquitous among all the people developing all these systems, the natural humanity of hey, I'm going to be responsible for my own community, my own behavior. Maybe we can bring back a sense of accountability, not just on the system sense, but also on kind of the personal sense. Because I mean, honestly, right now things are kind of out of control, and anybody can do anything anywhere. And I don't think that's a good idea, but I also don't think it's a good idea to impose governance or regulatory issues beyond maybe some basic safety rails.
All right, thank you, David. Thanks, Robert. That was an interesting discussion around interoperability. Folks, I have just launched a quick poll. If you'd like to give us your own views, should we be worried about the metaverse? I'll just leave that running for a little bit longer. Jean, I'd like to come to you. It's a two-part question that we've got from Valerie Layton, and that sparked by some of your comments about health and well-being. So the two-part question. First, how much will we be left behind if we don't use the metaverse? The second part is we heard about connections to medicine and health. How might we use the metaverse for health and well-being?
So about being left behind, yeah, that's a tough question, because it really depends on, I guess, how the metaverse will develop, because that's sort of a question. I think things are going to be so different for the generation that's coming into the workforce. And I was just talking to somebody's son who is graduating in architecture, and he said he's thinking about getting a master's degree in metaverse architecture. And so, that's kind of the thing that the young people have to think about, is that how their work is going to be different, how their career is going to be developed, given the basically the emergence of all the digital worlds, including the metaverse, including the real world metaverse. I think it's also going to be a key. So I think not to think about leaving behind, but to think about actualizing, developing and learning. So I think it's really important for us to consider that the world is going to be different, and let's be open-minded, and let's learn as much as possible and embrace the technology for the good things that it and the opportunity that it's going to create for us. In terms of health and wellness, so going back to the mental wellness issue, I think it's becoming an epidemic right now. We actually, in our company, we actually have a consulting psychiatrist who cannot wait for us to actually develop an AI psychiatrist, so that the psychiatrist could actually take on some of the work, especially the initial evaluation of the health and mental wellness state of the person that he's gonna work with. Because right now he's just overwhelmed. He's one person, and the maximum he could talk to is maybe about 5% every day. So he is so eager for an AI psychiatrist or maybe a psychiatrist assistant to help him so that he could scale and talk to like 1,000 person every month instead of 5% a day. And so, I think there's an opportunity for us to create the kind of environment in the metaverse that allows people to go to an expert within the metaverse to actually, get some support and preventive support before they actually need to go out and get a real clinician. But going back to what I said, these AI or metaversal psychiatrists still need to be certified so that they are delivering good, evidence-based protocol as with real psychiatrists. So I think it's really important for us to look at, health and mental wellness within the metaverse the same way as we look at in real life, because we are entrusting our health to these professionals. And even in a digital world, they're affecting our well-being in a sensory way. So I think it's really important to still make sure that there's professional associations in place, certification processes in place to make sure that the virtual doctors, virtual psychiatrists are well qualified.
Alrighty, thanks, Jean. I'm going to come to you, Stephen, with a somewhat philosophical question. You're welcome to also answer the issue of health and well-being. But Anna Braverman is asking, what are the philosophical implications on human beings of the metaverse? How will humans conceive of themselves, of each other, of reality?
That's an evolving question, right? So, I was asked to do a private talk to all the CXOs of the UN, and I did last year a keynote to 4,000 CEOs, and it was really that question as well as, what are the broader sort of questions and the philosophical impact in terms of humans and our evolution, culture, and society, and it's going to be profound. So I'm just going to let you know that I see this as a excuse me, as a pond. As a metaphor, sort of an idea how to frame it. Imagine you had a flower on a pond and it was doubling every day. You wouldn't notice it initially. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512. But when the pond is a quarter full, the next day it doubles. Now it's a half full, the next day it's full. And in terms of the evolution of all these sort of convergence and confluence of technologies that are involved in the metaverse, we're in that sort of vertical line up. And so these changes that you're thinking are going to have from a philosophical standpoint on humans and the evolution of humans, or even all the ecosystems in the world, is not going to be 100 years from now or 50 years. It's really going to be now in the next 5, 10, and even 15 years. And that means it's going to have a fundamental impact on how you see yourself, how you transform within your family, within your children and offspring. Everything is going to change because everything is going to be so accessible. And if you just do a quick scan through some of the research that's coming out from the different sort of well-known societies, look at the leading edge of papers, you'll see this transformation occurring, and it's going to have an impact on all of us. So our perspective is going to change. Our perspective of our future is going to change. Our children, our families, and business is all going to change, but very much in the near term. But we also live in a system, things like climate change and some of the other broader questions. So how do we address those in combination with this confluence of all these amazing technologies?
Thanks, Stephen.
And now on the well-being side, because you have the ability to do sort of a nano inspection of mannerisms and even sensors gauging where you're going, you're going to do a lot of predictive capabilities. From a precision medicine standpoint and personalized medicine standpoint that didn't even exist before. And as a result, any kind of condition, you can forecast or even be able to see it well in advance, not just in mental health, but in all the other dimensions where it's neurological or you know, on the physiological side. So that also is going to have an impact, and it's going to be again in the near term. I just want to make a quick comment, by the way. There's a comment on governance. We do have GDPR. It's been out there in Europe, this data protection regimen in Europe. And last year, they did come out with laws to try to codify, at least on the AI side, and all sorts of protections. And it's easy to, in my mind, it's easier to extrapolate from that to the broader implications of the metaverse. And other countries are adopting that. California has adopted something that's very similar. So I think from a regulatory policy side, you're going to see this expansion from the existing work. So I somewhat support what Josephine is indicating. And then from a governance interoperability side, the ACM, Association for Computer Machinery, they have SIGGRAPH, which is the largest organization. This is already being looked at, the interoperability side. You have the IEEE, again, they're a standards body. The UN ITU is looking at this, and even within the work I'm doing, I'm being asked to start looking at the governance, the interoperability, how do we create sort of a cohesive environment in the near term rather than the next 10 to 20 years. So this work has already started. And in fact, there are open platforms, open programs where anybody can participate.
Thanks, Stephen. Before I come to you, Josephine, I'm just going to share the results of our poll. There's quite a healthy dose of cynicism out there. Should we be worried about the metaverse? 59% are saying yes, 11% are saying no, and 30% are saying maybe. Josephine, I'll just come to you. You're welcome to comment upon those particular comments as well. I'll just find the question that I had for you. It's just moved, unfortunately. You bear with me a moment. No, it seems to have gone. But the question was, and it was from a Nikolai. Josephine, what are some of you talked about privacy, you talked about some of the cybersecurity threats. What do you see as some of the key cybersecurity threats that the metaverse needs to be concerned about?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple buckets of threats that you think about a lot in cybersecurity, and one is, of course, always financially motivated crime. So I think if you see a lot of commercial transactions moving to virtual reality or augmented reality applications, you would worry about sort of, are there opportunities to steal money? And what exactly those opportunities will look like will depend on the nature of what those commercial transactions look like, of course. So it's a little hard to say at this earliest stage, sort of, here's how people are going to go in and extort, or here's how people are going to go in and scam people or commit fraud in those settings. But that would be one bucket you would worry about. There's certainly a whole host of espionage concerns. I think, so Jerome asked sort of, are there particular features that really worry me from a cybersecurity standpoint? I think a lot about this in terms of sort of adoption and who might end up using these tools. And that I think is really where my concerns would come from. If the US Congress announced, instead of using WebEx, we're going to move all of our meetings over to Second Life, or whatever the alternatives are. You can see how dated all of my virtual reality references are. That would worry me, because that would sort of paint a big target on those applications and say there's a lot of sensitive information and interactions and dealings happening on these platforms. And then it's not that these would be new challenges. We would have to think about, okay, how are we doing access control? How are we encrypting communications on these platforms if people are intercepting them? How are we making sure that people can't get access to these meetings who are the wrong people who aren't supposed to be in them? All of those same challenges that we saw Zoom work through at the sort of beginning of the pandemic, when all of these really high value targets were moving to Zoom meetings, we would then have to work through for whatever the applications were that were successful in this space, if they were successful in this space. And so I think that sort of the thing I would pay attention to is less kind of, are there particular security vulnerabilities? And of course, there are many, as there always are in new technologies, and more who's using them and what kind of malicious actors would want to target them, right? Are these going to be sort of people coming in for money? And if so, there are certain kinds of safeguards that we implement to try and make sure that financial transactions are being verified and tracked and other things. Or is this an espionage risk, in which case we would have another set of safeguards somewhat related? Or is this a sort of public humiliation risk? Am I worried that somebody's going to move into my virtual reality space and deface it in some way or harass me? And that would again be sort of a different set of safeguards. And so I think kind of building out our sense of the threat models based on who's using these tools and for what will help us kind of get to the next stage of thinking about what the security intervention should look like.
Alrighty, thanks, Josephine. Well, we've just seen from our first poll that there was quite a significant percentage of folks concerned about the metaverse. I've just launched another poll. I'll just give people just a couple of moments more to answer that. We've asked what most concerns you about the metaverse: social insulation, state of surveillance, diminishes human cognitive skills atrophy from misuse, pervasive persuasion, it sees what you see and what catches your attention, biases of AI and autonomous systems, and societal inequality, a metaverse caste system. And David, I will come to you in just a moment, because those are based on some of your concerns that you put in your book. But let's just end the poll and give folks a couple more minutes. Still coming in. All right, let's have a look. So the state of surveillance came top at 31%. We've got social insulation at 17%, diminishes human cognitive skills at 13%, pervasive persuasion at 15%, biases at 12%, and societal inequality. So state of surveillance, Josephine, coming top there. Does that surprise you?
No, I don't think that surprises me. I think that sort of one of the things that we learn over and over again when we look at digital technologies is that the opportunities for mass surveillance are really unlike anything we have ever seen before. I think that there's a real question here about how different the surveillance that could happen with these types of applications will be from the types of surveillance that we're already worried about in terms of government data collection and analysis. I'm not sure. Again, I think so much depends on sort of what people use this for. So I'm not sure, is this actually going to allow better surveillance of me in my life than the phone that I carry everywhere in my pocket? It's possible, right? It's absolutely conceivable that it could. Certainly right now, the way I use virtual reality technology, it wouldn't at all, right? I could, you know, if I turned off my phone and I left it in my bedroom, then that would be a much more effective way to counter all sorts of surveillance than deciding I was going to forego virtual reality technologies. So I think surveillance is a smart and the right thing to be worried about, or one of the right things to be worried about. But I think sort of how much surveillance can impact you depends on the extent to which you're using these technologies, the ways in which you're using them, and who is collecting that data and what regimes there are. Stephen brought up GDPR, right, as one of the regulatory regimes around data collection. I think it's really important to point out that that is a regime that is very much sort of targeting private companies and how they can collect and process data. It places very few restrictions on government entities and what they can do by way of digital surveillance. And so I think sort of when we talk about surveillance, we also need to keep in mind who is it who we're worried about conducting surveillance and how many safeguards do we have in place for that.
All right.
Can I ask a follow-up question? I guess I'm kind of curious, Josephine, whether you are more worried about the public entities like the City of London, who's had closed caption television cameras in the at every intersection for the last decade. Are you more worried about kind of what the town of Brookline is getting on us, or are you more worried about Amazon's doorbells or Google's doorbells that are monitoring package drop-offs and people in and out of homes? Like where do you think where are you more concerned? Kind of state entities or private companies?
So I'm going to do the very professorial thing and not really answer your question, which is to say I'm more worried about private companies in the city of Brookline, but there are government entities I'm much more worried about than private companies that are not the city of Brookline. And the most important thing I want to say in response to that is I don't think that there's a sort of real wall between those two things, right? I think one of the things we see over and over again in the surveillance space is that governments and governments all over the world have ways of accessing, whether by legal means, whether by technical means, the data that's being collected from Amazon doorbells, from Google searches, from all of these other private entities. And so I think that there's real concern in both because they feed into each other. And it's hard to say, you know, oh, I'm only worried about Amazon or I'm only worried about the Chinese government. You have to be thinking about sort of all of the interactions between the public and private sector in this space.
Thanks.
Thanks, Josephine. Thanks, David. David, a question for you. I promised a further one for you. This one's about big tech. Will there be a takeover by big tech? Facebook, you know, we've just seen the Microsoft, Activision, Blizzard link up. Is there a risk that the metaverse will be subsumed by big tech?
I don't know about subsumed, but certainly they will. There are fortunes to be made if you can create a place that is attractive to many people and that many people hang out, then you can charge high rents for access to others or to advertisers. I mean, to me, from the previous list of the kind of hazards of that I identified in the book, the one that I'd love to bring up that seems to be in tension is you can either worry about pervasive persuasion, that is the business model for high tech in terms of monetizing our own attention, or you can worry about the digital caste system of supersite only for certain people. So in a way, like you can't really have one of them solves the other problem, right? Like the reason that Gmail is free is because our attention is monetized. So which is a better path to my other panelists? The path in which you have a business model where it's subsidized by advertising and therefore it's accessible to all? Or would you rather have a self-pay and much more expensive system that has a self-pay business model? Like which, if you could have either, which one would you choose for the metaverse?
You know, there's probably a third option, and that is this whole creator economy. In other words, you can monetize. Everybody's their own entrepreneur, and you can innovate, and that's where the market is heading. And then it allows then the disenfranchised, the developing economies as well. So each individual has the ability to monetize in some way, right? And so there's really three options, and I think the safer routes are the ones or the payer or the creator economy oriented ones, and then you're not going to get algorithms sort of oriented towards sort of a very focused group think that happens right now in the ad models.
Yeah, I like that idea. Although I think what we're seeing in terms of the big platforms is, like, I've been putting on snap filters on my face, which has a very vibrant creator community, and the tool that I'm using in order to make snap filters is free, but the way that they're making their money is by having 300 million people get on Snap between 15 and 20 times a day and monetizing all of the traffic that's happening between that creator community and sharing community for advertising.
David, would you also consider different options for different people? So let's say, if I want something for free, I don't mind being advertised to, so I'll pick like option one. For somebody who wants to pay a premium, they could have, no advertising and no data collection, and I'll just pay a lot of money every month. And then I guess somebody else could be, I don't know, somebody else pays for them. You could actually choose to pay for someone else.
I think that's very shrewd. I think that's, if I were in charge of monetization strategy for one of these big platforms, I would promote that kind of choice. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Alrighty, thank you. I just launched, and I'm sharing poll 3, which asks, which of the following do you see as potential benefits? Open up experiences previously unavailable, that got 37%. Create new possibilities or ventures, that got 31%. Boost sustainability, 3%. Bring people together, 7%. Make experiences enjoyable and exciting, 10%. And then improve remote working experiences, home and school. And that was 13%. As we finish, we're nearly upon 2 o'clock. I'd like to go through all of you, and if you could just sum up, perhaps in response to either the results of that poll or just from the comments of your colleagues, just final summing up words. Josephine, would you like to give us just your final words?
So I think the thing that's most interesting to me about that poll is this sense that there are experiences people want, and coming back to the earlier question of when should we be or why should we be supporting this technology, I think at the point where you feel it can give you experiences that you want, you should be supporting it. If you would rather have had this panel with me appearing as an avatar in your bedroom, then that would be a reason to support this. I'll tell you honestly, I wouldn't rather have that experience, but there might be others that virtual reality could have given me. And so I think that sort of you want to drill down into what are those experiences and how available are they, and are they available in a form that is actually fun, is actually engaging. And as we get closer to that, that would be a reason to be more supportive of these technologies.
Alrighty. Stephen, in just a minute or less, what are your final words?
There's going to be unprecedented new opportunities we can't even predict because of this escalation that's occurring, this exponential drive, but there'll be unintended consequences as well.
Alrighty, thanks, Stephen. David?
I guess I would encourage people to get in and try some of these tools, because I think our initial instincts around what will be compelling and what will be interesting and what we're worried about are, we just don't have great intuitions about the new world of spatial computing. So, I recommend people, download Sketchfab, which is a 3D asset store where you can kind of search for anything and drop it into your world, or tools like Apple's Reality Composer, which is a no-code, drop models into your world, assign behaviors, make little fun interactions. Snap lenses, which work in Zoom and they work in Microsoft Teams. So I would just encourage people to kind of get your finger, put your hands in the clay and kind of understand the plasticity of this new medium.
Thanks, David. Jean, some final words?
I think the metaverse, as with any technology, can be used for good or used for bad, right? So I think it's the human that determine how it's being used. It's like they said, a knife could serve as a murder weapon, or you could actually, do surgery and heal somebody. So I think, it kind of, it's on us to make sure that we have the critical thinking, the wisdom, the education to be able to use these tools to our advantage as a human society.
Thanks, Jean. And Robert?
I think that, for as much as we think we know about the metaverse and what it is, where it could be, it's still fertile ground and, kind of the undiscovered country. And there's going to be new types of, technologies or opportunities or interactions that we can barely even, grasp right now that will have far-reaching implications. As a quick example, the over Axie Infinity over the last years created, wealth for people in the Philippines that were, quitting their day jobs and, playing this play to earn sort of game with a new, kind of digital economy model. And more recently, my company and team, we demonstrated some tech where we had a full, one-to-one scale photorealistic digital twin of Miami South Beach that we could explore. But at the same time, people that were in Miami South Beach at the address we were exploring in the digital twin could see our avatars, walking around the street as if we were actually there. And then we were able to talk and communicate, voice connection and a video connection. And we were able to trade objects back and forth. In the digital twin, I could drop an object on the ground and it would show up in AR for the mobile people there like a second later. And when you think about things like that, and having the ability to be in a virtual environment or a twin of a location or a mall or a workplace and be in yet another country and still experience and interact with people that are there on site and AR, I think there's going to be whole new ways for people to have jobs or, learn new languages or surpass the restrictions and constraints they have, physically or nationally. And I think we're just barely at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's possible. So I'm very, very positive.
Thanks, Robert. Bhaskar, in our final 60 seconds, can you just take us home?
Well, I don't know whether I'm going to take you home or take you to the metaverse, but I guess my closing thoughts are that, and I've been involved in technology innovation, and trying to look around corners and mostly failing for the last 30 years. And one thing that has taught me is to always proceed with humility. And humility for all of us, those of us who are attempting to build companies, those of us who are attempting to opine on them. When the printing press came around, there was a lot of skepticism as to how this is going to be the end of human civilization. We'll forget how to memorize stuff, and we'll just lose human intelligence. Of course, we know history turned out differently. So humility in terms of what's around the corner, and any conversation today will become outdated tomorrow or day after tomorrow. The second is, yeah, we can talk about governance, we can talk about laws, we can talk about GDPR. Ultimately, the market wins. The market wins. Let me say that again. The market wins. So let's keep that in mind. Finally, we've been here before. We've seen lots of the spike up in terms of the hype cycle, in terms of excitement, in terms of investment, all for good reasons, and sometimes for not so good reasons. And the most recent experience that has given me a lot of pause and a lot of humility for all of us to consider. If you just think about AI, AI's moment to shine was the last 2 years. We had an unprecedented need for fast decisions, data pouring out from every corner of the world, humanity overwhelmed. What better opportunity for AI to finally deliver? What happened? A big zero, a big zero. Look at every tool that was developed for predicting and diagnosing COVID around the world. Every single one of them turned out to be a dud. So that's not to say AI is a dud, but we have to have the ability to reflect on these technologies and say, okay, what did we learn from their successes or lack thereof, and build a better world for the future? And I'm sure the metaverse is going to be a part of that. So thank you for the discussion.
Bhaskar Chakravarti, Stephen Ibaraki, David Rose, Jean Lim, Robert Rice, and Josephine Wolf. Thank you very much for freely giving of your time and your experience. You were an awesome panel, and I'm sure the attendees will join me in thanking you very much for what was a very passionate and very stimulating debate. And thank you as well to those of you who attended today. Please do join us again on the 16th of March when we'll be debating should we embrace cryptocurrency. We're going to send you an email with a link to that afterwards. We'll also be sending out a survey, so if you can give us your thoughts on this this particular panel so that we can deliver similar panels to you in the future. But other than that, for the panelists and the attendees, thank you very much for joining us today, and goodbye.
Thanks, Will.